What I'll do is I will encourage you guys to ask questions as I'm going through this too. Okay, so for those of you who've been into Flow, you know that our standard color when we generate a swarm is this standard neon green. It's a bright color. That's our standard color. And Michael had indicated that you know, when you put colorization even on the dots, the reason for doing that is if you know that you're going to go in some sort of direction where color is going to be an important part of your presentation, and maybe you're going to develop some sort of theme for colors, and you want them to be consistent across, let's say, continents in our life expectancy data set or whatever. That's when you do apply a theme to it. Let me just go into the edit mode here.
All right. Cool. And I just opened up a breakout room. I'll jump over there, but
yeah. Okay. And I think Michael did this very quickly. What I did is on my step 2 here, I chose a color theme and I applied it by continent. That might have even been the same example he gave. I'm not sure, but we have several different color schemes, and they range from vibrantly different, which is what our default color scheme is, to kind of milder types of colors. Like I know one color scheme that we have that people tend to use a fair amount is called Peach Rose Wheel, and it's a gentler color scheme. So the differences are more subtle, and it really just depends on what the theme is of your presentation, which color scheme you may choose. So the color scheme is the way it works is the first color in the color scheme. Let me go back to my default color scheme. The first color in the color scheme, and let's say that's the red color, maybe that will apply to the first instance in the CSV file that you're reading in that has to do with the particular item that you're coloring on, continent. So let's say if you had 5 records in the CSV file that were for Europe right at the beginning of the CSV file, that would, if red is the first color in this color scheme, then red from that point on is going to be reserved for Europe for this CSV file. Then say the next 10 records were from Asia, and let's say Asia was an orange color. Asia would be defined as that color. So the colors that are defined by the color scheme are very much dictated by the order in which these records are encountered in the CSV file. So that's an important item to remember, because let's say if you were reading from a CSV file and the order of the continents were Asia, Europe, and the Americas, let's say, and you were using this color scheme, you'd get, red, yellow, and orange, let's say. But let's say in your next CSV file, if the order of the continents was different, then you would get different colors for those continents. So, each time a CSV file is encountered, the color scheme applies. It's like it's starting from scratch, and it's applying the colors from the color scheme to the records in that CSV file. So we're not really associating red with Asia always, or yellow with the America always. We're always associating red with the first categorical variable that's in the CSV file, and yellow with the second. So as long as the records you have in your CSV files are consistent in the way that the continents are presented into Flow, the colors will always come out the same. But if the order in the CSV files are mixed up from CSV file to CSV file, your colorization will also vary over the course of steps. So, that's a lot of people don't think of that initially when they decide to use a color scheme. And I'd say usually it doesn't cause a problem, but it can cause a problem if your CSV files are ordered very differently. Okay, so let me just continue along this example. And for those of you who've been in prior sessions, you've probably seen either this example or something very similar to it. So on this scheme, my Asian countries came out red, and my yellow countries came out, or my European countries came out yellow, and my African countries came out orange, this orange color here. So that is the color scheme that I've got for that particular CSV file. Now, a CSV file is always associated with one of these swarms. So as long as I'm tracking along this same swarm, for this set of steps, I'm always going to have the same colorization applying to each item, because I'm using the same CSV file for each of these four. Okay. So my next step here, I think this is the one where I selected just the European countries for display. So now let me morph over into another flow that some of you may have already seen demos of. This is where we put the 10,000 largest cities of the world on a globe. So here we have these colors coming onto the globe when we first put the dots onto the globe. Everything is that neon green because I haven't changed anything yet. So now in this next step here, I am going to, here the only variation I did is I just changed the color of the dots. So there's several places you can change color. So if I go back here and I look at this swarm right here, the color of this swarm is green. Okay, that's why you see the green here. The only variation between this step and this next step is I chose to change the color of the dots. Let me see here. Oh, why are these all blue? Let me think here. Huh. I was expecting to get differences in colors here. Hang on one second here. Let me see. Oh, these are the city dots. Okay, the city dots. Yeah, they do have a population field. Actually, you know what? Right here, I don't know why these are not on a gradient. Let me go one step forward here. Okay, here the dots are still blue. Oh, you know what? Okay. Actually, all the dots are not the same color. All the majority, the vast majority of the cities in this particular chart are much more weighted toward the 40,000 persons in the city than the 37 million that you get for the largest group. So on this chart, okay, this is a gradient. It's running from blue to red, where the red are just the very largest cities of the world. And the kind of the intermediate sized cities are this tannish color, which is kind of halfway between the green and the red. So this is that gradient scale that Michael was referring to. And when I first looked at this, I wasn't seeing these dots out here. I was just seeing the ones on the globe, and I expected to see some more variation there, but that's not the case because it's on a population gradient. So this is a very common use case to colorize dots and also elevation above the surface of a map according to something like population. This could also be maybe economic output of a city. It can be any variable you want as long as you've got it in the data set. So that's the gradient. That's the gradient scale that Michael had alluded to.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
So just from so I don't know much, but I know graphics, and cyan and red are kind of the opposite ends of the color wheel. So as like a pro tip here, color wise, if you had, for instance, like a bright blue and then a dark green as your two colors, the gradient would be way more obvious. You'd see those in-betweeners more.
Yes, that is true. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll make these dots really a kind of a dark blue more toward more toward that end of the scale. And I'll keep this as a red, and I will get improved variation in the colors.
Right, because those are closer on the color wheel.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There's still a significant issue with this particular data set, though, in that the vast majority of the colors are much closer to 40,000 than to 37 million. So, you know, the wider your spread, the less variation you have in the dots, except for the endpoints. So this endpoint differs greatly from this one, but the problem is there's so many cities that are on the very smallish end of this scale. Yeah, but thanks for doing that. And you know, if you're in Flow, it's easy to change any of these colors. You just click on here, and you can move around this color wheel.
Yeah, change that one to orange.
Do one to orange. Yeah, want me to do the top or the bottom?
One like a bright orange or yellow.
Okay, for the bottom layer or the top?
Yeah, for the cyan. Yeah, for the bluey one, blue-green one.
Okay, I'll make that color there. Yeah, so when I did that, I've still got some variation, but it's not as it's not as wide as perhaps I would like. I found the best results I get if I'm just looking for color variation of the dots is if I pick one like down here. And even that one doesn't really. You know, it's this data set. It's so predominant. It's so dominated by the smaller cities. It's really hard to get a good scale.
I got a question going back to the color, or is it okay to jump in with a question?
Oh, absolutely.
I'll forget it in a little while. So back when you were on like talking about the defaults and the color palettes and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And you were talking about how, you know, USA is not always going to be the same color and stuff. But so here's the question is, can we, so what I'm understanding is there's some built-in palettes. And what I'm wondering is, can we clone those that like to take one of your palettes and then clone it and say, no, I want the so it's just working off the CSV file, and it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the CSV and assigning colors. But if you could say, no, I'd like it to go from this color to this color to this color. I like the color palette, but I'd like to reorder it. So it'd be cool if we could just clone that and say, this is my nations of the world palette, or this is my you know, top 20 videos or something.
Yeah, and it turns out that kind of thing is quite easy to do. And also, if some of you are users and you'd like to get some color palettes from us, send me an email and I'll be able to send you a bunch of colors with the hex representations of those colors. But let me show you one thing up here. But
you said that there were some defaults though, right? Or did I misunderstand? Like,
yes, we have
the basic default is basically the Seahawks with the bright green and the dark.
Yes, this color here is, that's right. That's right. This is our standard default color, is the neon green.
Yeah.
But when it comes to displaying colors in charts, like this one here, this one happens to be done with one of our built-in color schemes.
And that's what I was wondering, is like your built-in ones. I'd like to like clone that.
Yep.
And then adjust it.
Yes, and that can be quite easily done. So this default color scheme, that's the red, orange, yellow, you know, this color scheme you see up here. Okay. Any of the other, and that's the default color scheme. We have 2, 4, 6, 8. We have 10 different colors.
Nice.
And they're all different. This one's called hot. So this is probably, you know, warmish colors, I guess. And this one's called vitamin C, and it's got, you know, it's kind of a muted version of the kind of the default color. You know, the colors are gentler in this color scheme. So you know, we have 10 different color schemes, and the one I usually use for my demos is this default one because the colors are bright and they're quite different. So I just like using that one. Now, let me also mention that we have up here in our, what we call in the environment, we have the ability where you can create your own custom color scheme. And what you do here is you give the scheme a name, and then you can go through and you can pick out whatever colors you want to add to your default color scheme. So if this is the test color scheme 1 or test 1 color scheme, and I want to add a color to it, you know, I can bring up my color wheel and I can add green as my first color in that. And then I can say plus add another color, you know, and I can get the exact shade of green that I want if I've got some corporate standard colors or whatever. And if let's say if this shade of aqua, this shade right here is a corporate color or something, I can add that as an additional color. So what I can do is I can build up a color scheme, any number of colors you want, and then your charts will be, if you choose test 1 as your color scheme instead of default or rose petal or whatever, then all the colors will be selected from this in the order in which the colors are put in this color scheme.
Sweet.
So yeah, so that's becoming increasingly popular. We put that in about 6 months ago, and our corporate customers seem to always want to do something along these lines because they have standard corporate palettes and the like. Okay, so let me go back here. Okay, so up to this point, I've just been dealing with the colorization of the dots, and the colorization of the dots are always found on this part of the swarm definition. So when I click down here, it means I'm dealing with swarm number 3 or 2, which is the 10,000 cities. And this is where I go for this step to get the colorization for that particular step. Now I can go to another step and I can do completely different colorization if I want. The colorization is a step-oriented, what we call a perspective-oriented attribute. So you can have different colors and different steps if you want, even for the same data. Okay, so here I've been dealing with the swarm colors. Now let me start dealing a little bit with map colors. So a map does have an attribute, and this can vary from step to step also. It's got an attribute called a choropleth. And basically a choropleth is a way of colorizing regions that appear in a map. So in this particular case, this globe here, my regions are countries of the world. So right here, this is China, this is India. It turns out the choropleth that I did for this is I wanted to scale the colorization of each country according to the population in the country. So I'm scaling it by a field called population in millions. So the lowest population countries are going to be these bright yellow, and the highest population countries are going to be the rose. And it turns out India and China are so far ahead of all the other countries of the world population-wise that the only ones that even come close to being rose are India and China. The next largest countries like Russia, Nigeria, Brazil, United States, Mexico, those kind of make it into kind of an orange tier, but there are no other countries in the world that are even close. There's no other countries that are even a quarter the size of each of these two countries. So these two countries are the only ones that come out in red when you apply this kind of metric for colorizing the country colors. So now let me just do a slight variation of that. What I did here in my CSV file, I had another, I have another way of doing this. And on this particular map, let me go back to my map here. I had in my CSV file, I had a populations, a field that I call population section. And let me just show you what that CSV file looks like. So this CSV file is called Country World Population 1. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to take a look at that CSV file, Country World Population 1. I just click this edit button. I can see what the CSV files are. So here I've got the countries ranked by population, China, India, the US, and the like. The top 10 countries of the world, I gave a population section rating of 5. The next 10, starting with Japan and ending with Thailand, I gave a population section of 4. And then the next 20, starting with France and ending with Morocco, I gave a population section of 3. So I have groups of largest countries, the 10 largest, the next 10, the next 20. So and here I'm going to use the built-in automated choroplething that Flow provides, and I'm scaling the value according to this population section field. So in this situation, I only have 5 different values to deal with. And the 5s are going to be red. The 4s are going to be an orange color. The 3s are going to be less orange and more toward the yellow. And the smallest countries of the world, maybe some of these countries up near the Sahara qualify for that. They're going to be pure yellow. They're going to be the lowest populated countries. So this is a way, this is also a fairly commonly used technique where you colorize, you use the built-in choroplething algorithms in Flow, but you categorize in the CSV file how you want your colored categories to sort out. Okay. So that's kind of an intermediate step between where I was before when I was just scaling on the population. Now I'm scaling on this, what I call population section. And to change from this choropleth to this choropleth, all I had to do was change one value here, just going to a different place in the CSV file. Now, a more customized approach. Let's say if I wanted to make every color in the world a specific color, I can do that. Also in the CSV file, if I put the hex values of these colors in the CSV file, I can precisely control what the colors of the countries are going to be. And that's what I've done in this case, because if I look down here at the map, if I look down here at the choropleth, I'm coloring based on the value in a column in the CSV file, and the particular column I call section color. And what I did here is I took those top 10 countries and I made those rows. I made the second a more vibrant form of orange. Then I think the third place countries were the greens, then the blues, and then the sandy colored countries are the smallest countries in the world. So on this one, I'm actually specifying in the CSV file the exact color for every country. But the way I grouped it was I made the top 10 all the same color, the next 10 all the same color, and the like. And this actually this view here gives you kind of an interesting geography lesson. Rose represents the 10 largest countries in the world. And you can see in this swath of longitude here, I've got 6 of the 10 top countries of the world population-wise just in this one view. Got Russia, China, India, Pakistan, which is over here, Bangladesh, which is over here, and Indonesia. So those are 6 of the 10 most populous countries in the world. If we spin the globe, this is Nigeria. That's a very populous country. Brazil, the United States, and I was surprised that Mexico was the 10th largest country in the world. So this is what I would call the ultimate in colorization control, where you actually put the colorization into the CSV file. And I'll just show you that real quick. I'm just going to go back to the same CSV file I had open a second ago. Country, world, population, CSV. This last column out here, this is I call section color. This is the color for red, 0xFF007F. Okay. So the top 10 countries all have that color. Then the next 10 have the orange color and the like. So there's a lot of use cases where it makes sense for various reasons to color not only maps, but other things according to a color that's carried in the CSV file. So it's an additional setup step. But if you want to deliver a presentation and you want to have it deliver a punch in a certain way, where colors are a really important part of that, and it's important that certain things be colored in a certain way, then you can derive the colorization from the CSV file. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Okay. Okay. Just got a few more steps here. A lot of times what we do is when there's colorization that's used, we put up a little legend. And this legend is just a tiny swarm of data that basically has a label column. It's got a color that's put into the CSV file, and it's got a value of a dot that ranges from 1 to 5 on the horizontal axis. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I put that into a little scatter plot, and then I choose to not show the axes. So all of a sudden here I've got this legend kind of floating out in space, and it's a perfect match to the colors on the globe because I've used exactly the same hexadecimal values to describe the color.
Can you show us how you do that? Is that part of the CSV file or?
Yeah, I'll show you how I built this legend.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're always navigating flow down here in this object's timeline, and yellow items are swarms. These are CSV files. Notice on this step, it's the first time I've had 2 yellow items here. That's because on this step here, I've introduced this CSV file, which is a legend. It's my legend file. So if I
it's a separate CSV file added?
Yeah, just for the legend. This, everything on here, every dot on the globe is covered by a particular CSV file. Every dot in this tiny little CSV file is covered by a dot. So the legend is very simple. I've got the category group. This is the label, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, etc. I've got the color, exactly the same colors I had in my large CSV file. And I've got a value, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's it. So with this swarm definition, just 5 records, very simply defined, just using a regular flow definition of scatter plots, I can define the scatter plot so that the column, the height axis is value. I don't even have an x-axis or a z-axis, just the height axis. That's value. And then when it comes down to, am I going to show what the axes are? I come down here, and in my axis definitions here, axis options, okay. I'm not even showing the height axis. So if I click this on, so I'm going to show the height axis. Now you can see it. It's very faint in here, but you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. It's tiny, but I was going to hide it anyway. So, but I suppressed it even showing to that extent just by turning it off. So with these swarms of data, you saw a scatter part in the first part of this presentation. That is a very typical use of a scatter plot. You've got timeline along your x-axis, you've got life expectancy on the y-axis, and you've got countries coming out in the z-axis. This is just a variation of that, and I happen to only have 2 axes, or just 1 axis, and I've even suppressed the display of the axis. So I get this kind of floating legend.
Mm.
So legends are very easy to do in Flow. They are also, because they're easy to do, they're a good candidate for us providing an automated way of doing them. So
Yeah.
our engineering group is in the process right now of developing a new chart type, and the chart type will be legend, and it will be used for doing quickly constructing these kinds of things.
Sweet.
Okay, so now the next step here. Yeah, so it's very common to have a colored legend accompanying a colorized map or chart of some sort. Okay, the next thing I wanted to do, we have different ways that we can represent the world. So on this particular step, I'm using a map that is, this is the world expressed in an equirectangular format rather than a spherical format. So we can do that. And, you know, the controls we have for spinning things around so you can get different looks at it. You control these the same way that you control any other data object within Flow. So this is a world, and I'm using exactly the same colorization pattern I used on the globe. The difference is now I can see every city in the world. And these are the 10,000 largest cities, and you can see in Eastern China here, boy, I mean, it's one constant series of dots. So huge populations in this section of the world here. And also here, I think this is Indonesia and Japan. Huge populations per land area in those countries, far more huge than you see elsewhere in the world. You can see here that Europe is much more densely populated than the US and the Americas in general. You can see that populations live along the oceans for the most part. There's a lot of things you can see from this kind of a plot, and you can use color to enhance your view of it. Now, one thing, you know, there's also an aesthetic piece of colorization. So as an experiment here, I took the colorization that I had done for the globe where I was controlling every color. This is the same information that I showed on the globe about 3 steps earlier. And, you know, to my artistic eye, I like this one much better than I like this one. It's just, it really depends on what you're emphasizing. If you're emphasizing the largeness of countries, maybe this is better. But if you're emphasizing a beauty of a presented step or something, or you're really just focusing on the cities, at least to my eye, this is a much more attractive chart. So, you know, everybody can make their own judgments on that, and it really does depend on what you're using it for. So the aesthetic is an important part of color too. The choices of colors, the way that they're presented on a chart, and the reaction that you want to get from an audience. By the way, on that topic, it's kind of interesting. We have discovered, as we've been in this business, that charts that show tons of dots usually resonate very well with an audience. You'd think that maybe a summary bar chart or something that maybe makes things clearer on something are the ones that evoke really strong reactions. What we found is just the opposite. We found the opposite. And this must be a human thing of some sort. The more dots we have and the more lines we have on a chart, the more people get into it and get involved with thinking about it and admiring it, either from an aesthetic standpoint or what it's trying to tell them. So it's just an interesting thing that we've discovered over the last couple of years.
Bill, I don't know if this is off topic, but do you guys have metrics where you can show like time spent on?
Time spent in an activity?
Yeah, is there metrics of how long people viewed it and stuff like that?
Oh, you know what? I think Michael just came back online, back into the meeting. He might actually have the answer to that because we are now collecting data, anonymized data, that gives us some inklings as to what people are doing when they're in flow. Michael, did you hear that entire question?
Yeah, I think I jumped back at a good time. So
Perfect time. Yep.
yeah, I mean, luckily, because this is literally a website and literally people interacting with the web interface, there's tons of analytics tools for capturing those quote unquote events. So we have gone down to the level of detail of like, every click is essentially captured in terms of when someone hits the next button, all these other things. And so typically we've been offering that as an add-on service for our enterprise customers for any flow they want to see how it performs. And we haven't done really anything else with that. So that's it. It's there, and we're tracking it for our own sort of edification. But on sort of a user level for the enterprise level, it's a little separate.
So just on a speculative kind of level here, imagine a chart that had like top 100, who knows what, and each data point is tied to one of the who knows what's. When people so like time on site, that's great. We can get that on our own stuff, just like click throughs and stuff. But as far as like interaction, if we could see that somebody actually clicked on a point that was data point 73. So say that's a movie or a piece of equipment or any, I mean, the big chart is like 100 somethings and it's being presented in horsepower or something, right? And a person clicks on a data point to view that. Could that be captured?
So yes, it definitely can be. Not in the existing UI today for a user to be able to set it up themselves.
But for an enterprise.
Yeah, for an enterprise,
have that.
Because it would just be a little bit of code, but it's pretty straightforward.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, this is a good question.
Oh yeah.
And actually, the only other thing I was going to add to that is that I believe it's in the UI. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I believe we have the ability to add a direct link into each dot, and so sort of unrelated to analytics.
Michael, that is exactly where I was going. Was yep. So let's say it's top 100 something products, and somebody clicked on this one, number 73. And they saw some additional, like if they had a link, then like tell me more, or I want more information, and then that could go out to a URL. So we would have that trackable information that they clicked on it, and then there'd be like I'm sure we'd figure out a way to see that they clicked on it, and then they also clicked on the URL and went out to whatever the lead gen was, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Okay, so that the secondary part is definitely there today, and I'm glad you're excited about that. And this was one example. This was an example for
Michael. Why don't you share? There you go.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry. This was an example for what's his name? Kent Bai. Thank you. Kent Bai for the Voices of VR. And so we had built all of these different podcasts. And so each of these dots is one of his podcast episodes. Yeah. And each of these groupings is a category that acts as a like center of mass that pulls the dot towards it if it's related to it. And so kind of an interesting sort of way to organize the data that I was experimenting with. But the thing I really wanted to highlight here was that when you click on a dot, it pulls up a dynamic image. So this is an image that's being pulled from a web server. In addition, when you click on this, you can play the audio. So this is the whole podcast. And so what I think is really cool about that is that in VR especially, you're exploring this audio
Yes.
podcast, and you can listen to every one of his podcasts right there, and have this organizational, area you go to. Actually, we need to reach back out to him, because I don't think I told him about this update we made to it already. Yeah, but
Cool. Can you send me a recording of this, or this is being recorded right now, right?
It is being recorded right now, and we'll post it. We're trying to get quicker at posting it, but typically max a week later, but usually a day or two after we'll post it. Yeah,
I need this. This is like I said, I'm signing up tomorrow. This is the game changer for me.
Oh, awesome. Oh, good to hear.
Cool. That's really glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, I think links are, it's one of the areas that it's like under untapped, I guess, or I haven't explored putting links in
it's part of the decision tree. They talk about in the purchasing process, there's a decision tree, right? So people have awareness, blah, blah, blah. They focus in, and then they're like, oh, tell me more information. So cool.
Terrific. Yeah, well, good discussion. There is another item of color that I'm not prepared to talk about today, but Sierra Dawson on our staff is kind of an expert in this area, and it has to do with choosing your color palette from an accessibility standpoint, so that your charts are equally as discernible by people who are color impaired as by people who are not. She has some fascinating observations on that. She couldn't be with us today, but that is an important part of, depending what kind of organization you're with and how public facing your website is that's using Flow. Accessibility is an increasingly important part of choice of color palettes. So we'll put on a session sometime, and we'll have Sierra talk about that. And that's, I know I can learn a lot from listening to her talk about that.
Bill, do you know if she has is there an article in our help section related to color?
It's possible. I don't think I've read it if it's there, but it could be out there.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look under maybe color, if you do a search on color and accessibility, maybe.
Yeah, so I see one just on dot sizes and colors. I don't see one accessibility, but
yeah,
I'm just going to take a note that if we have anything, any documents, we should probably get them up there.
Yeah, and it turns out there are websites out in the internet where you can take a colorized screenshot or something and put it out there, and you'll be able to see what the color impaired views of that are. It's a pretty interesting website. I know I learned a lot about choice of color palettes and following Sierra's lead on that.
Hey, Bill, to follow up on that one, but for accessibility, are there best practices for dealing with not just color impaired, but sight impaired? Like, do people put in like an alt tag to the CSV file or something?
So it's good.
You go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to say it's something we definitely acknowledge as something we haven't fully prioritized, because we are a visual platform. We definitely know we need to acknowledge and account for everyone, and we do have text pop-ups and the ability to record audio, so you can add narration to it. So we try to add a lot of mix to it, but we haven't been able to really do like the
I was thinking for like
text.
Totally sight impaired people, it'd be nice if they could just look at the raw data, I guess, or listen to the raw data. But that's off topic. Sorry.
No.
Oh no, I'd say in these sessions nothing is off topic. Okay, I did not have anything for this discussion, Michael. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to cover.
No, I'm gonna stop recording, but